Thank you so much, Joyce. That was really helped articulate the meeting for us, and thank you for making meaning of it. I would also like to extend my thanks to Joyce for all her work in planning this summit, and her associates, Brianna Roche, Melody Hatchie, Lydia Perry, and others I might be, Sarita, of course, Sarita Pillai. So I'd like to thank the EDC team for all their excellent work during the course of this planning. So again, thank you. We've come together as a community after 5 years. So the program was initiated in 2015. We're now at year 2019. So it's a very important period of time because it's given the research a chance to mature. It's given our ideas as a community, as a research community, to think through the critical issues, to be able to produce findings, to look at emerging trends, to gather some insights, and to be able to come together now as a community to share and unpack some of this evidence is really critical for us. As Sylvia mentioned and Joyce mentioned, it's very important that NSF understands its investments. So after 5 years, it's a very important point. It's a good period of time to understand what STEM Plessy has produced over these years and what still needs to be done. What are the gaps? What are the real core findings? What have we yet to discover? And so this sharing of evidence that you're going to be going through over the next couple of days is so critical to how we understand the impacts of what we are doing. So that's one thing that the sharing of evidence is highly critical at this meeting. The second aspect of that is making meaning of that evidence, because we can aggregate it, but we have to make meaning of it. And when you get a chance to work together over the next 2 days before we get to day 3 and really do a synthesis understanding, when you get together to make meaning of that evidence, you're going to be in those groups where everybody will be studying similar things. So if you're in a particular grade level, you will be understanding the impacts at that grade level. And you'll be able to begin to understand what the projects in aggregate are starting to find about this very critical work for the nation. So in each of those separate groups, those report outs are going to be very critical as they get handed off to the synthesis team. So part of that evidence gathering is going to feed into the making meaning aspect of it. And then the understanding of STEM Plessy's program level impact. If in aggregate the program is not demonstrating that the work is having a meaningful impact on reconceptualizing STEM teaching and learning as we envision it for the future, then we want to come back together and think about the things and the strategies of what we're trying to do. And where we find a major impact, where we find that the work, even on an individual project-by-project basis, but also in aggregate, if these findings are starting to bubble up into something really substantial and also leading to new things, discovery. I mean, NSF is committed to discovery. So in your projects, you may go into research certain aspects, let's say, of computational thinking, but you may find that computational thinking as defined, certainly, in the discipline of computer science, is not a suitable fit for what you're trying to grapple with in the earth sciences. And so looking for those new definitions, those new findings, that's going to lead to the new research. And so we want to understand and make meaning of this and find out what are you finding out when you engage with your students. So this is going to be a real discovery for us at NSF, for the program officers who are here to listen, and for you as a group, as a community, to begin to make meaning of the research coming out across the portfolio. We asked you to provide us with certain data. This was the PI survey that got sent around to you. This was a lot of work to, upload your abstracts, think about questions, respond to it. Your responses actually helped us plan a lot of this meeting, so I want to thank you all for submitting what you did so that we could make meaning on our end and be able to provide you with the kind of sessions that will advance your work and your time and your research efforts. So now, the data that we gathered was from 83 of 156. So what I'm going to share with you, I wanted you to get a glimpse of of how we categorized your data. And some of it will be quantitative, and some of it will be observational data, some of the things that we had a chance to think about and do a little bit preliminary synthesis of just what we received. But again, I want you to know it's not reflective of all of your projects, so it's just a little glimpse and give you a little flavor of the data. So most of our projects are in the first year, so 64% are in their first 2 years. So this is a bar graph of what the community looks like at this point. So again, we started in 2015, it's now 2019. We have Massachusetts, New York, and California have the most STEM Plus projects, and of course these are very large states. So you can see the numbers of 22, 16, 15, 9, and 8 respectively in those states. States with no STEM Plus C: Arkansas, Delaware, Nevada, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and West Virginia. Now, one thing I want to make clear also is that this is based upon what was uploaded in that PI survey. There may be impacts in these areas, and there may be work you're doing in these states that was not reflected in that PI survey. Some of your advisors, some of your sub-awardees. So there are things that are missing from this data that we hope to get from you over the course of this meeting. Projects in urban settings are the most common locale, and you can see the breakdown of half of all projects take place in one or more locales, urban and rural. Let me look at this for a second. So you could see the breakdown there, urban, suburban, and rural. So actually it's a pretty nice split. Over 80% of the programs have an in-classroom component, and that would make sense because we're trying to address teaching and learning mostly in the schools, but you can see there's also an incredible amount of after-school informal organizations and communities. When you add that up, it's a very substantial amount of time that's spent out of school and in the field. And this may be something that emerges over the course of the next few days of how we might want to increase those percentages. How can we work better in our community partnerships to bring about more of a balance between school and out of school? But again, the program was pretty much targeted to in-school learning. Science and math were the most common targeted areas of integration. So you see a little bit of the breakdown there. So we have math, biology, engineering, environmental science, and technology. Very often when data is sent, we're looking at the sciences. We're going to be investigating some aspect of science, and it has been non-specific. So it didn't allow us to categorize all of the subfields within the sciences. So that's another aspect of what we might want to unpack a little bit at this meeting. 35% of projects were designed to serve one or more underrepresented groups, and that's great. But again, I do want to say that because this is less than half of the PIs responded, and this was taken off of abstracts. So if data was not in the abstract, the NSF abstract, then how you're reaching out to underrepresented groups would show up as these statistics. Given it's a requirement to be serving underrepresented groups, this is data that we'll have to look back on. 1 in 4 programs serve multiple grade spans, middle and high school students. You can see the breakdown there, 20, 52, and 42, elementary, middle, and high. And just some quick stats, about a third of PIs, again, that we received responses from have more than one STEM plus C project. 1 in 5 projects are collaborations. Nearly 60% are female. The PIs are female. The majority of PIs are professors at 55%, followed by researchers at 23%. Approximately 64,000 students have been served and 7,500 teachers. So that's some quantitative data, again, based upon what we received and from the abstracts. Now, I want to unpack STEM plus C a little bit because I want to give you some of the observations that we pulled out on more of a qualitative level. So, as you know, you're familiar with STEM plus C, but I wanted to recap this for you. The integration process is a process that we really have to study very carefully. And over the course of the 3 days, we're going to be unpacking that integration process. What does it actually mean as a process? How is integration being used effectively in your coursework? So if you are integrating CT in biology, is it really a seamless integrated process? And what are the complications of doing that? And how are you doing it effectively? Because how you're doing it and what's emerging from that is going to yield our impacts. That's how we're going to know what has really been, how we have effectuated the solution of creating STEM plus C as an integrated process. And then building evidence for defining computational thinking. And Joyce hit upon a few of these ideas before. What is the perception from the STEM disciplines? How distinctly different is it? And how do we map this? This is so critical to our understanding of, at the heart of this program, because you're integrating computational thinking, but what is computational thinking from the perspective of the disciplines? So this will require a lot of deep unpacking about the nature of this. And one of the aspects of STEM plus C is that we really did hope to redefine it and find new ways of describing it, new ways of thinking about it, so that we can develop the appropriate pedagogies that would lead to more integrated teaching and learning. So it's building evidence on that, building evidence on the integration process, and understanding how students are really going to apply computation and computing into their understanding of the disciplinary and interdisciplinary processes. Now, here are some preliminary insights, also from the survey, but this is more on the qualitative level. So in your projects, there have been many different takes on what CT is. So there are distinctions among you. Definitions are mainly tied to applying the use of computational tools rather than defining the intersection of CT and STEM. So that's something to think about. Some projects assume that CT is already defined versus using the project to help dig deeper, to define it in the project and in the disciplinary context. So CT has been reflected on as a practice, as a cognitive way to problem solve, as a skill, how to do something, and as for computational participation. So we want to look at that in these meetings and see, is this what we believe? And is there anything to be emerged from your collective work? These are the fields that have been represented throughout STEM plus C projects: artificial intelligence, cognitive science, chemistry, computer and information science, economics, education research, engineering, geological and earth science, history, math, physics, political science, psychology, and sociology. This is a truly interdisciplinary program. And when you look at these fields, this is about convergence. And I know my colleague Alejandra mentioned to me about convergence in math. So that's a different story, but there is convergence in math. But this is about convergence of these disciplines, and where these disciplines are coming together in your project and how they are coming together is of great interest to NSF. And as Sylvia mentioned, we have the Convergence program, which is an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary program. And to be able to do interdisciplinary work across K-12 is really nothing short of phenomenal. I mean, this is, you are all laying the groundwork for future learners. And I really want to underscore that the world is moving towards convergence, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary convergence. And how you understand and make meaning of this is so essential to the future of our nation. The future learner is going to be a learner who is flexible, adaptive, is able to crisscross fields, is able to study computer science, and also has a physics background. Be able to move across the biological sciences, but also have chemistry, also have physics. And convergence is exactly about that. It's about this new learner that has the skills and the competencies to be able to perform in multiple disciplines. And what that leads to is it allows us to be able to solve the most critical problems facing our nation and the globe. We have critical environmental problems, as you all know, that we have to solve. And it's these students who are able to have that multidisciplinary background that will help us find the solutions to that. Because if I might, when you have the expertise across multiple disciplines and you're able to conceptualize how to solve problems from many dimensions, you're able to really, you can pull together that expertise to create something that a single discipline cannot conceptualize. When you have a view of, let's say, if you're looking at atmospheric science, and the problem of the atmosphere is also interfacing with the oceans, so we know that there's a threshold between the oceans and the atmosphere. So not only do you have to know atmospheric conditions, but you also have to know biological oceanography. When the thresholds of those disciplines come together, you are able to create solutions to those problems more than you would if you were just maybe singularly focused. So the problems are so vast, and the reason they're so vast is because we have massive amounts of data that are providing such extraordinary insight into Earth systems and how we need to think through systems processing and think of the globe and think of science in a much more comprehensive way. Your work is laying the foundation for that new learner, the new learner that's going to grow into this mindset of being able to solve these interdisciplinary problems. Another intervention, that the range of interventions have been really large, which is good. And there's been some leveraging or designing of computationally enabled tools, learning technology platforms for supporting teachers and students as a curriculum enhancement. So you're developing lots of interesting things, and we'll see them in the Project Expo, what you've been designing to enhance teaching and learning in the classroom, outside of the classroom, and that's going to be really interesting to see that, but it's reflected in your work. So again, because we're going to go into more in-depth processing of what we have to do for with Sarah Kay and Chad, who I introduce next. But some of the questions, that I have certainly on my mind, and I know the program officer have, what has been found on the characteristics of computational thinking in STEM fields? What are they? Please help us map this out. We really need you to help us map this out. And how is CT being operationalized? How is the integration process being operationalized? How is CT measured? Do we need new tools? How are we able to approach new thinking? How do you measure new types of thinking? When you have to measure thinking that's coming from so many different directions and different disciplines, and that's been a very hard thing, that when I looked at the data, I was thinking, wow, this is a very complex process of having to understand how you measure students that are crisscrossing different fields in different ways and reconceptualizing and making meaning of new evidence. So, and I'm also hoping that, if PIs can reach an understanding from the evidence that's emerging here, over the next few days, and you'll have a chance, you'll be working in all these groups, you'll be working with Chad and Sarah Kay and thinking through, and the synthesis team that we've set up for you to kind of try to put this together about what has really been emerging and where do we need to go next as a community. Because those findings that you get at the end on Friday will begin to emerge to allow you to do new forms of research. So you began your work in one place, and what you have found out should take you to new levels, and we want to be able to create the pathways for you to do new types of work and to envision things, and maybe as a community to envision things that you wouldn't be thinking on a project level.